Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Parsons, and this is a video concerning the nuts and bolts of writing in a scholarly style, and we were beginning to expect this out of our doctoral level students. So this is going to show you how to do it. First thing is when you get an assignment to write a paper, you should think of it as a project, and whenever you do a project, the first thing is not to sit down and start writing, it's to understand the tasks that are necessary to get to the point of where you're going to be writing. So first of all, it's important to understand the assignment. Now, you may think you do understand the assignment, however, many times I get papers that obviously the student didn't understand the assignment because they are writing about something totally different. So it's very important that you understand what the assignment is, and this is one of the areas, of course, to use the Ask Questions feature in an email if you're unsure. So what is the topic that the assignment is asking about? It's many times useful to go ahead and restate the topic in your own words so that you understand it in a way that makes sense to you. And it may be a good idea to come back and ask your professor or ask me if it's stated in your own words, is that what the assignment is about? Is that what the topic's about? And then in addition, understand what the requirements are. Usually the assignments for papers have a certain number of pages. There may be a range, 6 to 8, 5 to 7, 25 to 30. And you need to know, really, are these fixed, that you absolutely have to be within those requirements, or are they just general guidelines about the amount of effort that should go into it? And it's important for you to know that too. Many times I tell students, well, if you run out of things to say, and you're only 3/4 of the way into the page count, that's probably okay. I don't want to have you padding your report or padding your paper with things that are irrelevant just to get to the end of the pages. However, if the assignment says it's for a 5-page paper and you write 12 pages, obviously you're going in a different direction than what the assignment was about. So it's important to understand, are the page number requirements and also are the reference requirements, are those fixed? You absolutely have to hit them, or are they meant to just give you a guideline of where you want to be? So the first step is to understand the assignment. The second step is to begin some preliminary research on the topic. Now, if you feel like you're well versed in the topic and you've already done some reading because of your assigned readings, then you may have a fairly good idea about how to go about the assignment. It never hurts, though, to go in and do a little preliminary research to see what the experts have to say. Because remember, you're not writing your own opinion, your own knowledge. You're not an authority. What you're doing is you're going to use your ability to search through the literature to find out what the authorities say about it. So don't be too sure that you understand the answer to the question until you've done some research. So generally it's a good idea to do some preliminary research to find out whether, for example, on a particular topic, whether there is one consensus that everybody seems to think about it or write about it the same way, whether there are very different opinions about it that range from one thing to another, because this is obviously going to influence how you're going to pursue the assignment, how you're going to answer the questions. Okay, so that's the next step, some preliminary research on the topic. And then number 3 is, based upon your preliminary research and your understanding of the assignment, you're going to create an outline. And that's going to include a title page, an introduction, the body of the paper, and there may be as many sections there as answer all the different subtopics that you decide need to go into the paper, a conclusion, and then your reference pages. What we're mainly concerned at this stage is more the body of the paper. What are the subtopics going to be to help you address the question, the topic that's being answered? And I'll go into an example to kind of give you an idea once I finish all the steps. So we're through step number 3, and we haven't written a word yet. We've simply done some research and, well, we've created an outline. Then based upon the topic and the subtopics that you've chosen based on your review of the literature, now you're going to begin a more thorough collection of peer-reviewed articles that will support your outline. Remember, your outline lays out how the paper is going to be developed, the areas you plan to address within your paper, and now you need to have the research and the literature that supports those particular areas. Step 5 is then to get the research organized, and then we'll start working on your rough draft. Okay. And I would recommend that rather than trying to write it from beginning to end, you work on one section at a time. So section number 1 may deal with one set of topics or subtopics, and you work on that. Then you move to the next one, and you make sure that the literature that you're using and the approach that you're using addresses the way that that particular section has been organized. As you're working through the paper, through the outline, if you feel like you don't have enough support, enough literature, then you go back to the library. By now you should have a better idea about what you need and what you're searching for, so your searching will probably be more targeted and more effective. So you continue working until you finish your rough draft, and at this stage the rough draft doesn't worry about spelling or grammar, punctuation. You're just trying to get the information organized into the right places so you make your points. Then you're going to review the draft and start making your revisions. So you'll be editing and reviewing and editing and reviewing and revising until it's finished. Step 9 is then to start turning it into the final product. So you're going to add a title page, write up your introduction and your conclusion and your reference list, and then you're going to proofread it. That's the final go around until you've fixed all the punctuation problems or spelling errors, so it's as good as it can be, and then you submit to SafeAssign. Okay, so it's a fairly long, involved process, which seems like, well, this would take forever, but as you do it and you practice it, you do get faster at it, just like doing a recipe. The first time you work through a complicated recipe or a complicated project, it takes a long time because you're reading the instructions and going back and doing the next thing. So here you're reading the instructions and then doing the next thing, going back and reading the next set of instructions. Once you get familiar with it, if you've made the same recipe 100 times, you don't have to look at the recipe book anymore. You know exactly what ingredients you need and how to go about doing it. So the idea is we're going to get at this issue early in your doctoral program so that as you write more and more papers, you'll get faster at doing it the right way. The problem is if you don't do it the right way, we're we have a very difficult time ever getting you through this program, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the best thing to do, I find, is to, rather than simply say this is what you do, this is what you do, is to create an example. And so here the example assignment is to write a 6 to 8 page APA format paper. You need to have at least 8 peer-reviewed journal articles cited in the paper, and the topic for the paper is describe and explain the main differences between the scientific management era of management thinking and the human relations era of management thinking. Okay, so a lot of people just jump in and say, okay, I can start writing, I know all about that. But you don't know all about that. You may have opinions about it, but your opinion doesn't really count until you found out what the experts have to say about it. So back to our steps of our project, we have to understand the assignment. Do you fully understand what's meant by era of management thinking? This is going to be important to define in your paper because the reader doesn't necessarily know what an era of management thinking is, and consequently you're going to have to understand what an era of management thinking is. Notice that you'll have to both describe as well as explain these things. So we're going to have to describe the different eras in terms of delineating what features made them different, and then explain how those differences change the way we thought about things. Okay, so you're going to be both describing as well as explaining. Are you familiar enough with the term scientific and management relations to begin researching them? Or do you need further explanation about what exactly we're talking about here? It's a 6 to 8 page paper according to the assignment, but is that a fix? Does it have to be at least 6 but no more than 8? Can you go over or under? This is an important thing again to realize. It says you have to have 8 journal articles. Do those have to be brand new ones? Could they be ones that you've used before in previous assignments? Can you use journal articles from the assigned readings? Can you use a textbook? So those are all questions you need to ask and have answered before you want to proceed with your research. And then, as I said, it's usually helpful if you restate the topic in your own words. So for example, for you taking the assignment and restating it, you may say, what are the main ideas that make up scientific management era? What are the main ideas that make up the human relations era? What are the main ideas that are different between the two eras? Now, if you had a question about whether this is an accurate interpretation of the assignment and you wanted to shoot me an email or give me a phone call and say, this is the way I'm thinking about this, is that what the assignment says? And I may say, yes, that's exactly what the assignment is asking, or I may say, no, I don't think you're quite getting it. I think you need to try a little look at it this way. So don't work on the assignment until you understand what you're trying to do. Now we're continuing on with our example and following the steps. So the next step says we're going to do our preliminary research. So we know we're talking about these management eras. We're going to first look over what we've read before, because generally the readings that you've had in the class should somehow relate to what your assignment is. So you may be going back to your first week of readings for the class and sort of say, oh yeah, we read a couple of articles back then that talked about the eras and when they occurred and who the important figures were, so I think that would be a great place to start. Then you go to the library and you start searching on the topic. So you might search on general terms like management eras or scientific management or human relations management. But the more familiar you are with the field, saying, well, we already read about this in the first week of class, you might say, well, really what I'm going to need to do is learn a little bit more about Elton Mayo, because he was one of the key figures of this area, of the human relations era. Or Frederick Taylor, he was a key figure in the scientific management era. Okay, so now you're tailoring your and focusing your searching upon a much more specific and smaller group, and the results you're going to get are probably going to be much closer to what you're going to need for your paper. Then based upon what you find out, you should begin to see what the literature in general says about the topics. You should be familiarizing yourself. You should also be collecting these resources, these journal article references, because those are going to be necessary to put into your paper. They're one of the key ingredients. If we want to go back to the recipe analogy, these are the egg whites, or these are the salt or garlic or whatever you need. You're going to have those to make it come out right. Now, based upon the literature that you've done, you're going to create your outline. And as I said, each paper needs to have a title page, each paper needs to have an introduction, and then the body of the paper will lay out the different topics, subtopics that we're going to deal with. So section 1 of our paper is where we're going to deal with the different eras of management and kind of give the reader a sense of how we think about management in terms of these different phases. Okay, so we're going to summarize how management and leadership thinking has been described as eras, and we're going to use supporting literature that says, yes, this is the way that we think about this. And we were going to try to identify where changes in the thinking defined a new era. That's going to give us an overview of this concept of eras of management. Then we're going to move to the next section, and we're going to work specifically with the scientific management area. And here we're going to talk about the key figures in that area, the time period, what kind of events were happening in the world, and what things caused the scientific management thinking to be appropriate for that particular period of time. That's going to be section 2. And section 3 is going to be the human relations management era. Here we're going to kind of describe the same thing. When did it happen? When did it begin? When did it end? What events were occurring in the world? Who were the main contributors to the field at the time? And how the thinking during this period, again, changed the world in terms of how we manage and think about our practice and think about management. Section 4 of our outline, and eventually our paper, will be the main differences between the two eras. So we're going to look at what things contributed to the differences and how did the world change as a result of these differences. Okay, so section 1 deals with an overview of the whole idea of eras. Section 2 deals with the scientific management era. Section 3 deals with the human relations management era. Section 4 deals with the difference between the two. And now section 5 is going to be our conclusion, and the next part would be our reference list. Okay, so this helps me as I start to develop my ideas about how I want to deal with this paper. I'm going to have it broken down into these various sections, and now my next step of research can take me into the specifics I'm going to need for each one of these sections. So based on your outline, you go back to the library, and now you can search much more directly. What I pulled up here are just an example from a student's paper from this class the last time I taught it, and as you can see, this is again for one of the papers, and she starts with the A's and it goes up to the L's, but she has quite a few references. She had several 2 or 3 pages full of references just for her paper. Okay, and as we get into how you write the paper, you're going to see you're going to need these references. Okay, 2 or 3 or 4 references is not going to give you enough support for any type of an argument. You need to have lots of references. Now, step 4 is where we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and finish with our sample. So now it's intermission. All right, back for step number 5. So we're now in the rough draft phase. We're organizing our research, our sources, our articles that we've got, and we're beginning to put them into the various sections of the paper the way we've set up our outline. Now, the most difficult thing about this whole process is the converting what authorities have said into what you want to say. So, for example, you wish to say that the scientific management era started in the late 1800s. But because this is a scholarly paper, you can't say that. You are not an authority on the subject, and you certainly weren't an eyewitness at the time. So the way that you say this is the following. According to Barber in 67 and Winston in 74, the so-called management era began much earlier than the demonstrated in the writings of Taylor. In fact, Jones and Jones, 2003, trace some of the origins as far back as the 1700s in the work of Adam Smith. However, for the purposes of this paper, the scientific management era will begin with such and such, as Howell and Long in their 2006 paper describes. So we know what we want to say. However, we want to say it through the authorities who've written papers that have been reviewed as being valid evidence and full of their own references, and that's the way that you write scholarly research. And that's the most difficult part to actually learn how to do. So obviously you're going to need more and more sources and more research. So you're going to be going back to the library as you work your way through the sections of the paper, and finding more evidence for what you're trying to say. You'll find that the librarian will be very helpful to you as you get more specific about what you're looking for. When you're finished, you've gone through all the sections and you have what you want to say and support with all the peer-reviewed journal articles that you need. Now you've finished the rough draft. And at this stage, don't worry about spelling or punctuation. Those little things we're going to work on later. But the main objective is to get your ideas down on paper or down in the computer, and especially the support that you're going to use. Now, once you're finished, now it's time to start revising. So now we're looking to fix up the spelling and the grammar, the sentence structure, the flow, the transitions. Okay, all the things that you learned in high school English class about how you take a paper from a rough draft to a finished form. Again, you've got to keep your references. That's the thing that separates regular writing from scholarly writing. But you did that. You've done that early, so you're not revising something that doesn't have sufficient support. Now you're simply revising the way that it reads. I've heard it said that good writing is 10% creativity and 90% revision, and I think that's probably true. And it's easy for me to tell when I read papers those that did not have enough revision to them. Step 9, again, we're kind of in the tidying up stages here. We write our introduction, put on our title page, put in our conclusion, and our references. And here you can see the details for each one of those. Finally, step 10 is to proofread. Proofreading isn't editing. Proofreading is kind of going over everything to catch the smallest error, so what you turn in is as perfect as it can be. Things like, which version of there are you using, or are you supposed to be using? The computer won't catch that. All these versions are correct spellings, but only one works in a particular situation. If you can, have a fresh set of eyes. Look over the paper. They may see things that you've looked at 20 times, but you have gotten so used to it being there that you don't see it anymore. And so finally your paper is finished. You've submitted it to Safe Assign, you sit back and wait for your grade. You will need to be able to write in this style. It's not, well, maybe I don't have to do this. You do have to do this. You do have to learn to do this. By the time you get to your dissertation, you have to be very proficient at it. Okay? It seems like it's going to be very difficult, and it may be. Some of you seem to write close to a scholarly style already, and you need to pick up a few more skills, but generally you're pretty close. Others need a lot of practice, a lot of learning to make their papers scholarly. But practice makes perfect, and practice makes faster, so I would expect as you do more of this, as you follow the guidelines, you will get better at it. You know, everybody starts at a different level. Some people have good skills in a certain area, not in the other area, so don't be frustrated because, you know, your skills may be not at a certain level compared to somebody else's, but that's the point of the class, and that's the point of the assignments. And that's the reason that I've kind of rearranged this class so we've got more shorter writing assignments so that we can actually work on the specific manner your papers are being written. So start today. Use the method that I've provided here for your next paper. Now I've kind of gone through this quickly, but what you can do if you want to make a copy, either a copy for your computer or a copy for on a piece of paper, you can pause the video and use a screenshot, or what we used to call a print screen. Then at that point you can save that print screen, save that screenshot, or send it to the printer if you want to make a hard copy. So any of the particular slides that you see that you weren't able to write down or you want to see them again, just pause the video and then take a print screen. Okay, this is as long as I want it to be. It covered everything that I hope that you'll be able to do in your next paper, but again, it's going to take practice for you to be able to do it quickly and effectively. So good luck with it, and I hope to see some of the results in the next paper.